Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to AACRAO's Credential Chats. I am really excited to be joined this week by somebody from some place that's been doing this about as long as anybody, Erika Knudsen from the University of Indiana. Erika, thanks so much for being here. Oh,
Indiana University.
I am so sorry about that. Indiana University, even though it says it on her background, I still messed that one up.
Everyone does.
But thank you so much for being here with us and coming and sharing your story.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
I wanted to just kind of to frame for our viewers, maybe you could just sort of share a little bit about, yes, you're doing this for a long time, and you're still kind of figuring it out. One of the things that you shared with me, that I feel is almost like a subheading for that where we end up going here is things change. So maybe you could just kind of share with us, you all are literally about 10 years deep into this. So maybe you could share a little bit about how things change.
Okay, so I guess what I'll start off with, and I'll try to abbreviate the probably 8 years of it because everything changing quickly has been pretty much in the past 6 months. But we started a journey under my previous registrar, Mark McConaughey, who a lot of AACRAO folks will know as kind of he's the Brad Pitt of registrars as well as the Brad Pitt of micro-credentials. He really wanted to improve the transcript. The transcript has been around 100 years, doesn't work very well. People don't know how to speak to it, speak from it. The only people who care are people on university campuses. So we tried to find alternate ways to improve the student experience. So I realized that micro-credentials is a very broad term. It deals with lifelong learning and skills learned. But at IU, our focus was, to begin with, very focused in on how to improve the experience for the student in terms of how they could speak to their experience and how others could view their experience. So we looked at competency-based education. We looked at various competencies. We looked a little bit at badges. But at that time, badging was a relatively new arena, and we weren't ready to get our feet wet quite yet. And then we looked at trying to improve the transcript through various improvements to the transcript. We did some work with Parchment trying to make a cover page to a transcript. Where we finally landed is we landed on what basically ended up being a CLR, a comprehensive learner record, platform that we use to describe experiences that a student had in order to, explain more richly their experience at IU. And we partnered with Paradigm to provide this. And now Paradigm markets it as the Scholar Record. And what it is I wouldn't call this a micro-credential as much as I would call it an alternate credential. Because what we use it for is a way to highlight programs that a student has completed. For example, we have something called Global Gateways, which is a program that we're pretty renowned for, where in a school of education, students can do their student teaching either at a reservation out west, in the inner city, an urban experience, or abroad. And they have to do a series of activities and program requirements, as well as teaching and taking classes. And so we use this Scholar Record, this alternate credential, to package it all together and say, they did this Global Gateways. It's better than just saying in the transcript that they did Global Gateways, because they get all this additional information, what country they taught in, what grades they taught, all sorts of stuff like that. And we're really excited about this. And we thought we were going full tilt ahead. And Noah, I don't know if you want me to get into the big wrinkle that was thrown at us in the past 6 months or not, but that's how we arrived to where we are today. And our big focus has been on making things that are have governance and that we can attest to. So one thing about the Paradigm record, not to sound too much like a spokesperson for Paradigm, but we really like it because it uses that blue ribbon technology, and it's just as safe as the certified electronic diplomas that they provide. So
Yeah, and something that I really want to kind of put a pin in there is your approach is all student focused. That's sort of where you're coming from is, the transcript is there about the student. Your approach at Indiana University is really about taking learning records into a space of students actually using their own learning records. But I also hear that while, there's a huge focus and centering on that storytelling, that elevating and enhancing of the transcript, that there's also a real, kind of holding dear to validity, that people still do
Yes.
need to trust this.
And that was one of the reasons initially that we shied away from badging, although badging has come a long way. Because we really want to provide something that we're willing to stand behind. Right now, and I guess I can go ahead and address the wrinkle that's been thrown at IU now. We are Indiana University Bloomington. We are part of a system-wide school. We have 8 campuses. And the university as a whole uses Canvas Credential for badging. And IU Bloomington, as I mentioned before, we were looking at alternate credentials, and we wanted something that was more personalizable and much more secure than the original versions of badges. And the personalization is also something that we're very proud of. A lot of badges will give you requirements that have been met and say that the student completed it. But the thing that we have with our alternate credential, which we call an e-notation, using the Paradigm Scholar record, is that you can say, a student in Global Gateways taught in Columbia. They taught high school Spanish or what have you. So I almost lost my train of thought there. Hold on. Processing. Help me out, Noah. I lost it.
Well, Erika, I think one of the things that I love about you personally sharing this, as well as the Indiana story, is, as we discussed
I'm
before
back.
we went live, this notion of highlight real, REEL, versus highlight real, the reality of things. And I just love that, you are so real about this, both, with the institutional journey and your own personal vulnerability with where were
But
we there? So
I remember
there you
what I was
go.
going to say. I was
Jump
going to
back
talk
in.
about the big wrinkle. The big wrinkle. Okay, so we are a system school, and the system, as a lot of you may know, iPads. The federal government wants to start tracking micro-credentials. Micro-credentials are huge. As I said, we've carved out our piece of the world in improving the student's ability to speak to their experiences and to provide validated, immutable documents for them to use, electronic documents. But other people are doing other things. People are, badging competencies, they're badging experiences, they're badging classes, they're badging in the workforce. It's a huge arena, and the feds want to know what we're doing. And, quite frankly, higher education's behind the curve on this in a lot of ways. And Indiana as the state is also wanting to get on this and start counting these things. So the university got a group of people together and said, okay, what do we call a micro-credential? What are we going to say? How are we going to count them for the federal government? How are we going to count them for the state? So here we were happily, chugging along with developing a governance process for non-curricular experiences. We wanted to create these alternate credentials for things that were co-curricular in nature, that would attest to student involvement. And the next thing we know, we are thrown into this task force with 8 campuses trying to decide what the definition of a micro-credential is. And one of the biggest pieces that I was trying to get out of that was, we can define a micro-credential, but don't say a micro-credential and an alternate credential are the same things. And don't equate a micro-credential with a badge. That to me is one of the most dangerous spots to go, because it really locks you into something. And badges, I know digital wallets are becoming a thing, and I know various organizations are building digital wallets, and I think that's great. But while we're, barreling down this, the bullet train in Japan in technology, and we're trying to figure out which one's going to last, don't leave your options open. One of the things that came up, so we did define a micro-credential. If people are interested, I can explain what it is, even though, quite frankly, it's probably not the one I would have defined if I was king of the world, but there it is. But one of the things that they wanted to do in order to count micro-credentials, and again, you have to remember, I'm fighting for our little alternate credential here, our Paradigm Scholar record, which we think is a very valuable tool for students because of the extensibility of it and the the fact that students, you can make it very customizable to a specific student. But they were like, okay, well, we'll count all micro-credentials in Canvas credentials. We'll just use everything there, you know. And first of all, I'm a registrar. If we're saying that this is something that IU is signing off on, well, then put it in the student information system. Don't just let it languish in Canvas credentials, which may disappear because things have disappeared before. Anybody remember Kowali? We were supposed to be one of the founding institutions for Kowali. So, yeah, I'm babbling.
Not at all. I think that, a lot of people, when they hear, they will feel a real affinity as you talk about things chugging along, and maybe think that's a really great verb because it might be driving them to drink in some cases where they, just you're operating in your campus, but you're also within a system, within a state, and, you think you've gotten started on one thing, and then, a wrinkle happens, as you put it, where all of a sudden we need to, kind of collaborate or bend or do things differently than maybe we thought when we first started out. And so I think that your story is something that a lot of folks in the AACRAO community who watch this are gonna feel like very glad to hear that they're not alone. Because I think a lot of people are dealing with this. And I will mention something that Erika did touch on is wallets. And you in Indiana are one of the state leaders of the actual state adopting a wallet. And so that might be something, as she points out, leaving your options open, investigating some of what else is going on in your state, and within your system might be a real helpful way to identify headaches, before they actually hurt your head. Something that I would like you to expand on, with our couple minutes left, is you talked about the importance of your meaning making. And we know from our own AACRAO data from surveys we did last year that, credential confusion is real. And one of the things I hear you saying is that there doesn't necessarily have to be a right definition, but it is helpful when people get together for shared definitions.
Yeah,
Can you
so
talk just a little bit more about that? Yeah.
so when you mean shared definitions, you mean how the group came together and made this one definition of micro-credential. Yeah, I think that, so for example, we created a definition, and so the definition is a micro-credential is smaller than a certificate, so a standalone certificate, and it's more than just a class. So it's a class plus. So it's a class plus another class, so two classes, or it's a class plus certain requirements that may occur outside the classroom. That's what defines a micro-credential. For non-credit based micro-credentials, it would have several activities that would equate, to that amount. And in our system, we have one school that's looking at micro-credentials that are clusters of 3 courses. Other schools are doing badging for non-assessed learning, for lifelong learning, through their continuing education programs. And then there's us who still, ours fit the definition of micro-credentials, but we're not using badges. So I try to focus on ours as alternate credentials, but trying to find that middle ground where all of us can arrive at something that's workable. Now, overall, I mean, no one's going to be happy per se, but everybody's going to be in a place where we understand each other. And I don't know that I don't really know. I know a lot of the universities around the country, state universities, some are set up like us, others are not. A lot of them have a lot more autonomy than we do. We are definitely governed in trying to make policy decisions. There's a lot of state oversight, to be frank. I mean, our state comes in and tells us what we're going to do in a lot of ways. And so we have to operate within that structure. So,
I really appreciate, your frank framing of these issues. Yeah, I think that as we've seen on the AACRAO Exchange community, that these issues around governance, around policy, are some of the hottest topics that people are talking about right now. And you just in a few short minutes hit on how things maybe aren't always going to go our way, and even when they are going our way, that can change too. And we have to be flexible, and that things are moving fast and changing really fast. That things change, as you told me when we prepared for this. What one quick thing, I know we're coming up on our final moments here, but you did right before we went live say that something had come in the community around student information system, and you did have something you wanted to share with people that might be really helpful for them to hear.
Yeah, so we a number of years ago, one of our campuses, our Indianapolis campus, was awarded a AACRAO Lumina grant for a comprehensive learning record. This was a I don't even want to 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and they got this grant. And with that grant, what we did is they have something that is called their experiential and applied learning record, and we built it using that money into our SIS. So we added tables to PeopleSoft, which is our SIS. And so now they're PeopleSoft tables, and we can store completed credentials in that. So they'd have to have, a student program plan stack, and they'd have to, have some type of hook, biodemo information, which of course we said something about using this, and our reporting person immediately piped up and said, I need all the biodemo because, she's got to report it all. But those tables are going to allow us to store this information that aren't enrollments or aren't traditional credentials in a way that isn't necessarily in a vended product that, obviously PeopleSoft is vended too, but it's going to stick around a little bit longer than potentially some of the badging systems that are out there that have been bought out, a couple of times over. So we're excited about that. We still have some hashing out to do. I'm ready to put it in there, and not everybody is. So I'm fighting the good fight because I feel very strongly that if we're saying something's coming from Indiana University, we need to have a permanent record of it.
Well, and that is just such a point to end on. Erika Knudsen, Indiana University, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.